So I am just so happy to get to introduce Sarah Sikich, who has been a dear friend and a great colleague of mine for how long? Oh, decade-ish.
Yeah, decade-ish.
Yeah. Anyways, we have similar war wounds from having worked on the Marine Life Protection Act together to set up the network of marine protected areas. But Sarah is in this incredible combination of science and advocacy and directs, of course, the Science and Policy Program for Coastal Resources at Heal the Bay, which is focused on the Santa Monica Bay. But Sarah does work that has great transferability and application and incredible impact for far more than just the Santa Monica Bay. And of course, today she's going to be talking about this plastic pollution problem, but Sarah's expertise is really wide-ranging. And I just want to make sure that you understand that she is really viewed as one of the preeminent marine experts and scientists and science communication experts in California. And folks in the legislature really look to Sarah as an honest broker of information. So I think you'll kind of see that in her presentation today. Sarah also is vice chair of the Santa Monica Bay Restoration Commission, which is this really cool multi-jurisdictional body that doesn't have any regulatory authority, but does a lot of planning and allocates helps allocate resources toward specific restoration efforts, all of which are meant to fit together to enhance the Santa Monica Bay and move it toward a more healthy state. She got her bachelor's from the University of New Hampshire in marine and freshwater biology, and then got her master's from the Bren School at UC Santa Barbara, where she did her thesis on marine protected areas. So we had a fabulous discussion at dinner about plastic pollution. And there I learned that she has done a great deal of sailing herself, including around the Sea of Cortez, and that is one of the places where she first encountered the immediate effects of plastic pollution on marine mammals. So she's got some graphic stuff in her, and lodged in her memory, which I think continues to motivate her on some of this work that you'll hear about tonight. So I don't know, were you going to say something first, Laura? Because I just popped up.
That's okay, that's fine.
Yeah, all right.
I'm going to do my usual spiel.
Then I'm going to sit down because I did my thing.
Did you get your coffee?
I got my coffee.
It's very important for amazing. So welcome, and yes, thank you so much, Sarah, for coming this evening. If you've never seen me before, or you've never been to a marine event before, marine is an acronym. What? An acronym. It means the Monterey Area Research Institutions Network for Education. We are a graduate professional development program. We're aimed at promoting ocean leaders for the future, and we provide different training opportunities and different professional development opportunities to help graduate students and early career professionals do that. This is an example of one of those opportunities, is getting to interact with wonderful people such as Sarah. And so if you enjoy this event, then please come back to future ones. Although this is the last one of this academic year, so you'll have to wait till the fall for new ones. There are marine campus liaisons. There are students in this room that are liaisons for the program, and I can direct them towards you at the end of the seminar, who can give you more information about local campus events that they themselves organize if you want to get together with other ocean interested students. But in the meantime, do enjoy. This seminar is is set up a little bit differently from maybe seminars you're used to. We're going to do a regular talk for about 45 minutes, a regular Q&A for about 15 minutes, and after that we're going to do a small group discussion with dessert, so make sure you stick around, please. Just to give you some more deeper thinking around this topic and around the concepts that Sarah brings up. You're here for a learning opportunity. Let's try to make the best of it that we can. And then once we've done our small group discussion, we'll have a little bit more time for a few more questions once you've had time to process. And then you can finish the beers and the food on your way out. So we should be pretty good. If you need any help with anything, then do not hesitate to ask me, as long as it's not over the top of Sarah. Okay? Enjoy. enjoy. Thank you.
Right. Well, thank you. I feel so blessed to be here, and thank you for the kind introduction, Meg. Meg's been a mentor of mine for a really long time, and I feel so lucky to have learned from her and worked with her, and she's been great at giving advice to me and colleagues that I work with in advancing ocean conservation. And I've had the pleasure to get to know Laura a bit as well and learn about the marine program, which I think is awesome. One thing after finishing Bren that I've really tried to stay true to is continuing to cultivate leaders in the field of ocean sciences as well as ocean policy. And so to see this room full of people who are thinking about that in their own lives is really heartwarming. And especially on a Friday night of a holiday weekend, to see you here is really impressive. So thank you for being here. Like Laura said, I'm here to talk about plastic pollution issues and some of the policy work and science work that I've been doing in that realm, as well as challenge you to think a little bit about how we face challenges in plastic pollution legislation, and share some stories and take questions. I'm a very informal person, so if you have questions throughout my presentation, feel free to ask, answer, or raise your hands and ask questions. I'll call on you. I want it to be very conversational and not very formal. So definitely, if there's a slide that piques your interest and you want to talk a little bit more, feel free to make yourself known. So, a little bit about Heal the Bay before we jump in. We're an environmental organization that really focuses on the Santa Monica Bay and LA region. That's where we got our history. We are almost 30 years old, 30 years next year. We were started by one woman who was moved by the issue of water pollution in the Santa Monica Bay. She was an ocean swimmer. She had friends who were ocean swimmers. Dorothy Green is her name, and she was not a scientist. She was not a policy professional. She was just a person who was sick of people getting sick from swimming. And she was married to a music professor at UCLA and had access to looking into research, and found out that our sewage treatment plants in the LA region were not up to Clean Water Act standards, and were getting waivers and able to discharge basically primary treated sewage out into the bay. So she took it upon herself to organize people on this issue and petition for these sewage treatment plants to clean up their act. So she was a big mentor to me. She's no longer with us, but she's inspired a lot of people and grown the organization to what it is today, which is 40 people and a long history of really transitioning the Santa Monica Bay from a dead zone back in the 80s to a place that's thriving now. So I really enjoy working there, and it's a great organization because we have a grassroots presence. I get to go out and do beach cleanups and talk to elementary school kids, but at the same time, a week may find me in the legislature, like Meg said, talking with people who are making laws and decisions about ocean protection. So to play on both levels is really fun for me. So if you have questions about career stuff too during breaks, I'm happy to talk about that as well. But with that, let's dig in on plastics. So, who's seen The Graduate? This is a little bit old for many of the people in the room, but there is the famous scene where Dustin Hoffman is talking about plastics, and they say one word, plastics. There's a great future in plastics. And boy, there is. Plastics are one of the major things that we use in our lives today. You can't, spend your day without encountering it in your car parts, your fridge parts, your single-use plastics. It's everywhere. And they're really taking a toll on our ocean environment. This is a figure from a 2010 US EPA report that just talks about municipal solid waste generation over time from 1960 to 2010. So the upper level is the total municipal solid waste generation, which is just growing over time, and the bottom one is the per capita generation, which is not quite as high rise as the total municipal solid waste generation, but trends are really what you're looking at there. This is total, so this is not just plastics, but 2 years ago, EPA put out a data just looking at the different types of municipal solid waste, and I think these numbers are impressive. 32 million tons of plastic waste was reported to be generated in 2012, and that's 12.7% of the total municipal solid waste. 9% of that was plastic that was recycled, and the total municipal solid waste that's recycled is 34%. So basically the story here is that we're not recycling much of our plastic. A lot of times when we talk about plastics issues, people say, oh, it's simple, let's just recycle them. But it's not an issue that we can really recycle our way out of. And a lot of the solid waste is not durable plastics. The durable plastics, the things in your car parts, your electronics, they're not finding their way into their waste stream that often, but the single-use plastics are really a major problem. And they're a major sustainability problem, not just environmentally, but that's what many of us think of because we're working on ocean issues, studying them, or policy, and we see the issues firsthand. Meg alluded to one of my encounters, but before I went to grad school, I was working on a boat in the Sea of Cortez doing some eco-tour tours, basically, with a small cruise company. And I was leading kayak trips and snorkel trips and hikes through the islands in the south part of the Sea of Cortez. And I was with some of our guests on a kayak trip, and we came up on a small isolated beach, and there was a sea lion laying sick on the beach, and it had plastic hanging out of its mouth, film plastic, plastic bag type plastic. And that just really hit me hard because it's a beautiful place of the world. I saw at one point while I was there multiple species, I think it was up to 8 species of marine mammals feeding on one big bait ball. And so in a place that there's not many people and a lot of wildlife, to see wildlife being impacted by, human-made plastic really hit me hard, and it was something that I felt compelled to work on. Research has shown that over 663 different species, both marine and terrestrial, have been impacted by ingesting or becoming entangled in plastic bags, or not plastic bags, plastics in total. So it's not just the bags, it's many issues. We're going to talk about bags today because that's one of the policy areas I've worked a lot on. It's also an economic issue, and these stats are usually the ones that are more compelling to policymakers. These two stats here are just beach cleanup day, annual beach cleanup costs for Los Angeles County and the city of Santa Monica, but LA County spends over $4 million each year just to clean up the beaches, and that's just one part of the areas they're cleaning with trash. So it's really costing local governments a lot of money to deal with the litter stream. Also, the societal issues. Communities are blighted with plastic bags. If we go into urban Compton Creek, there's a stretch of the LA River tributaries called Compton Creek. That's a soft bottom part. Much of the LA River, if you've been down there, is channelized. But this is an area that's actually got some natural habitat, and we do cleanups in that area. And people are just amazed with how much trash they're finding because it gets hung up on the different vegetation that is growing in the soft bottom part of Compton Creek. So it's not just the coast, it's also our inland communities that are blighted by this issue, as well as quality of life. Who wants to go to a trash beach? It's not somewhere that's attractive to tourists, and that's a big driver of our California coastal economy. Some of the common offenders we find in our beach cleanups, cigarette butts are number one constantly, which is really sad because a lot of our cleanups at Heal the Bay are done in the Santa Monica Bay area and the city of Santa Monica, which has had a ban on smoking in public spaces and beaches for almost a decade, and we're still finding cigarette butts to be the number one polluter in our beach cleanups. So they are legacy, they don't break down, and we're at the end of the storm drain system, which extends nearly 90 miles inland, so we're getting everything that's washing from the whole watershed down to the beach. So it's still a major problem, even though smoking has decreased a lot, and many local governments have put in policies that don't allow for smoking in public spaces or on beaches.
Are they cellulose, or are cigarette butts plastic? I don't know how to smoke.
There's plastic in the filter piece. So it depends on the brand, but most of them they're made of plastic, so they're not able to break down, which is something that most people don't think about. Not that smokers are probably caring about their health so much, but that's another health issue associated with smoking, not just the tobacco, but the plastic as well. Plastic bags are the number 2 thing that were found in the 2009 International Coastal Cleanup Day. Ocean Conservancy runs that International Coastal Cleanup Day once a year, and they look at the data, and plastic bags were number 2 globally in 2009. Styrofoam is another big one, polystyrene food containers. That third photo is a photo just south of the Santa Monica Pier, and you can just see the rack line there is littered with foam after a storm. And that is not uncharacteristic. We do a beach emergency team, so after the first big storm of the year, which is called the first flush, we have volunteers who are basically called the night before saying, hey, we're gonna be at the beach at 8 a.m. tomorrow, come out and join us. And that's what it looks like pretty much every year after the first flush storm down in Los Angeles. And then bottle caps are another big one. So this is, it's kind of pretty from far away, but if you look closely, you'll see a lot of bottle caps and that sort of rainbow sorted trash. That's a bolus from an albatross in the Northwest Hawaiian Islands. And bottle caps is something interesting. After looking at the data, you wouldn't necessarily predict that that's a top item that you find, but they're easily broken off of the top of a plastic bottle, and they're made oftentimes from more durable plastics, so they last longer intact in their shape rather than being broken down into smaller bits. And obviously there are better alternatives. I don't have to go on and on about the alternatives. You guys are probably well aware of them, but things like reusable bags and reusable coffee mugs, reusable water bottles, and then fast food products that are either recyclable or biodegradable are obviously much better alternatives than these single-use plastics that we're finding. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about plastic pollution prevention from a policy perspective. Also the environmental community role in catalyzing action against plastic pollution, and then some of the opportunities and challenges that I've faced and my colleagues have faced working in this arena. But to get you in the mood, I'm going to play you a little video. Let's see if I can figure out how to do that. Do we have sound? Sound is very important. While we figure out sound, I'll tell you a little bit about this video. Has anybody seen the Majestic plastic bag before? A couple people. Oh, you are in for a treat. This is a short mockumentary that we put together at Heal the Bay when one of the single-use bag ban policies was being considered and pretty close to passing in the state legislature. And it really helped raise awareness. So let's give it a shot and see if it works.
The open plains of the asphalt jungle. Home to many creatures great and small, and the popping ground for one of the most clever and illustrious creatures, the plastic bag. Today we explore the cycle of life for this curious creature, the plastic bag, on its migration to its home, the Pacific Ocean. Once released into the wild, the plastic bag is unsure of itself. It falters at first. But soon, with some help from the wind, the bag will be airborne. This flight will be the first in its long journey towards its final destination, the garbage patch in the heart of the Pacific Ocean. Using the wind to guide it, the plastic bag moves across the city through the air. A city park. This park may at first seem an idyllic place for the plastic bag, but danger lurks round every corner. Here it will encounter many enemies, including one of the most dangerous, park services. Poor little fellow. Looks like his journey ends here. Meanwhile, our little bag has encountered one of nature's most deadly killers, the teacup Yorkie. Once the Yorkie has locked onto its victim, there's very little hope of survival. But using its superior size and deft maneuvering, our bag manages to escape the Yorkie's talons and flee for its life. Over the course of its miraculous migration, the plastic bag will cover vast distances through neighborhoods, across parks, and down city streets. It is now nightfall, and our highly advanced night vision cameras have managed to capture for the first time in history a plastic bag in pitch black. Phenomenal. The vast cement rivers of California, home to literally dozens of animals. Many plastic bags will not make it out of here. The reeds and branches will see to that. As at home in water as it is on land or in the air, the bag's natural buoyancy makes it an excellent swimmer. It's close now, and it can feel it. At last, the bag has reached the gateway to the open sea. Careful to avoid the mouths of hungry sea life that feed on the helpless plastic, the bag will travel hundreds of miles to join the thriving community of plastic known as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. The Garbage Patch is a veritable plastic oasis where millions of tons of plastic garbage remain trapped by the currents. It is said to be twice the size of Texas. never actually biodegrading, here the plastic bag can live indefinitely, peacefully coexisting with billions of other petroleum species before breaking into ever tinier plastic pieces, thus completing the plastic cycle of life.
So this was a really great opportunity for Heal the Bay. We were working on a plastic bag bill that looked like it had some legs. We had worked on a couple of versions of it in a few years in the legislature, and this was the third year in, and it was really getting some movement. And I think this is just a great example of how a message can be amplified through good communication. We were lucky to have some partners at an ad agency that, staff are stifled and having to sell kitty litter and toilet paper and boring things like that, and they offered up their creative energies to help us on the plastic bag initiative. And the group's called DDB, ad firm. They came up with this brilliant idea and put together the video, and we were really excited about the potential and thought, hey, if we can get some celebrity voice to narrate this, it really could go somewhere. You never know if something's going to go viral or not, but put our feelers out to various people, and Jeremy Irons bit. And he was actually filming in Ireland at the time, but was willing to do a reading of it in between shoots. So he did this at like midnight. First take was great, and we were able to put it together. We blasted it out through a bunch of partners, and within a couple of weeks, it had over 1 million hits on YouTube. And we had tons of letters going into the various members of the legislature. At the end, you could see there was a click to a petition that could be sent to folks in the legislature. So it was just one of those examples of taking an issue and playing with it a little bit. There was a lot of creativity in there, but it really helped amplify the message when we were stuck at a point where we just couldn't quite get past a few things. The bill ended up not passing that year, but it's the closest we've ever gotten with a plastic bag bill. So it was really an exciting project to work on, and it just shows, we've got a great communications team, but we couldn't ever put something like that together. But through that partnership, we were able to really come up with something that was fun and creative. So back to plastic pollution policy. Now that you're in the mood, we are going to use plastic bags as sort of the case study example, but there's been a lot of different types of single-use plastics that California has been working on at various stages, whether it's local government or state government or just sort of policy guidance among respected authorities for plastics. But since plastic bags has been a really popular one, and there's been a lot of movement, we'll use that as the case study. But to give you a little context, here's an overview of the plastic pollution policy landscape in California. Back in 2007, the Ocean Protection Council, are you familiar with that body? Mostly. It's a group of folks who are high-level, secretary-level decision makers. They're non-regulatory, but have a really important role in advising California, both the legislature and decision-making bodies, on policy work to advance to protect ocean resources in California, and they're a very powerful voice. So in 2007, they adopted a resolution that was very aggressive and basically laid out a map for California to address both the need for research on plastic pollution issues, as well as some simple policy advancements that could really help us deal with preventing plastic pollution. And it was a pretty amazing hearings. I attend a lot of hearings, and for me, that's like the exciting part of my job. And this one was really incredible. We had major leaders. The strongest leader at the time was Lieutenant Governor John Garamendi on the council, who basically looked at a draft that the staff had put together, which was good, but not great, and went through the recommendations that he had to strengthen it, and they passed unanimously. The hearing room was filled with 100 people, and everyone was getting up, whether it was NGO representatives, scientists, or individuals who just care about the issue, students as well, and kids, basically encouraging them to do something. And it was a unanimous vote to strengthen a resolution in one hearing. And that doesn't always happen. It very rarely happens. So it was really an exciting hearing to be part of. And that resolution then was followed up on by an action plan that they put together, the Ocean Protection Council staff, that outlined how California could go about starting to really take policy action to prevent plastic pollution. And in their action plan, they detailed 3 priorities. The first was to adopt bans on single-use items that have a readily available alternative. So plastic bags falls into that category because reusable bags are readily available. A second was to put fees on items that we find commonly in the litter stream and marine debris that do not have a readily available alternative, because that's still a deterrent, but it's a little bit softer of a solution. And then the third was to advance extended producer responsibility, shifting the onus to the folks who are making those items that we're seeing in the litter stream to clean up their act. So it outlined some really clean ideas of what California could do. At the same time as our state was looking at this, the West Coast Governors Agreement, which is California, Washington, and Oregon working together on issues facing our ocean health, put together a team of folks to work on this issue and think about common recommendations we can come up with across the entire West Coast to address these issues. And recently, they've actually prioritized marine debris as one of the 3 things that they think we can really do something on West Coast wide. And they're currently advancing a database. It doesn't sound that sexy, but this is something that's strongly needed, because what it will do is take a lot of the citizen science data that's being collected by groups like Heal the Bay or Surf Rider and their beach cleanups and put it all into one spot, so we can look collectively across the West Coast to see where are major issues and what kinds of trash are we seeing in various places, where are the big volumes, and start to examine where the hotspots are that need the most action. So at the same time as sort of those advisory bodies are coming up with recommendations both on science and policy, we've seen a lot of local government action to start preventing the trash from getting to the ocean. And I think there's a couple of reasons why we're seeing more action at the local government level. First, I think it's where we see the biggest cost burden. Local governments are the folks who are paying to clean up their act. They have to do the street sweeping and the litter cleanup, so they're feeling it in the pocketbooks. And secondly, I think there's just been a big surge in citizen engagement and putting pressure on local governments to do something about it, because that's who they go to. They go to their city council folks when they're sick of seeing their neighborhood littered or their beach littered. So there's a lot of vocal action from community groups at that level. So that's been really exciting to be part of the local government action, and I think that's also helped put some pressure on the state to take action. And there's been several legislative attempts to stop top items from the litter stream. Not many of them have been successful to date, but I think it'll continue to be something that we put pressure on as an environmental community. I'll talk about it in a bit, but one of the things that has been successful is pre-production plastic pellets, or nurdles. One of the first pieces of legislation that I worked on came out of the Ocean Protection Council resolution before they even did their action plan, and that was a call for plastic producers to put in best management practices to control against loss of those pre-production plastic pellets on their facilities, as well as transfer to rail yards and trucks and things like that. And I'll tell you, it sort of colored my work on legislation, because it passed in one legislative session, which I've now learned is basically unheard of. Usually it takes many years to get legislation through, but this was a bill that we thankfully had the folks in the industry also on our side. And so it was something that environmental community as well as business community came together to ask for, and it went through, and the State Water Board was actually the most concerned about it, because it would be staff resources for them to implement it, but they also were supportive, and now we've got a program to help monitor to make sure that these facilities are not discharging nurdles. In addition to legislative work, there's also regulatory requirements on trash. So has anybody heard of total maximum daily loads before? Oh, look at this, good group. These, for those of you who don't work in that realm, are basically water quality speak for pollution limits under the Clean Water Act to help set forth a pathway to meet water quality standards in water bodies. So basically, water body may be listed for different pollutants like nutrients or toxics or metals or trash, and then once they become listed on this impaired list of waterways, a total maximum daily load, or TMDL, has to be put in place for them to have basically a pathway to be cleaned up. And they're based on the natural background level of what should be in that waterway, which for trash is 0. It shouldn't be in a waterway. And so in Los Angeles, before I even started working at Heal the Bay 10 or 12 years ago, total maximum daily loads for trash were put into place for both the LA River as well as the Bayona Creek, calling for zero trash, which was really progressive. And so this basically, to comply with them, municipalities would have to put in catchment devices, whether it was storm drain grates or full capture devices in the storm drain system that filtered out trash to keep trash from getting through the waterways. And now we're up to many more TMDLs in place, but in the past couple of years, with the recent water bodies that have been listed, there's been a new creative spin put on them. It costs a lot for cities to put these best management practices into place, and so there's been an added piece that will give a local municipality a little bit of relief if they do something like adopt a plastic bag ban, put forth a smoking ban, or put forth an ordinance that requires recyclable or compostable alternatives to foam food containers, because those are absolute source control measures that don't cost a lot of money. So now that that's in place, we've seen a lot more local policies on foam and plastic bags, because it's actually an incentive for that local government to have some more time to comply with their trash TMDL. And then another thing we have is just, oh yeah, go ahead. So the cities have to pay for compliance with the total maximum daily loads, but if they get an extension on their timeline, it's something that's good for them because they can figure out how to spend that money over time a little bit less, and they're reducing significant portions of their waste. So an LA River study showed that plastic bags were 25% of the waste found in the LA River. If you put a ban on plastic bags in your community, you're already dealing with source control. And there are some grant programs where cities can get some funding from the State Water Board or the Clean Beach Initiative to help put best management practices forward, but it is a cost burden on the municipality. Good question. And then there's also strong public engagement and media coverage on this issue. I'm continually impressed that Los Angeles area media wants to cover plastic bags because it's been an issue that LA's been working on for 10 years, but every time there's some sort of action, the media is there and wants to cover the issue. I think it's something that they get. It's exciting to them for some reason, and that's great for groups like us because people will care about it because they continually just see it in the news. So with this landscape, we have seen most of the movement at the local level. For polystyrene or styrofoam food container bans, there's now over 50 municipalities in California that have some sort of ordinance that requires more recyclable or compostable alternatives to foam food container bans. This is just a sampling of those municipalities. And then with single-use bags, we've seen even more. So there's over, I think the count's at 105 now, municipalities that are under some sort of single-use bag ban. Most of them address both paper and plastic bags because that really will drive the most sustainable use, which is a reusable bag. And these are just a sampling of some of them. San Francisco was the first city in California to move forward. Manhattan Beach and Malibu were soon after that. And then once Los Angeles County went about 5 years ago, we've seen a ton since then. But it does end up to be sort of a patchwork quilt of policies. So this is just a sampling of the different kinds of policies that we're seeing. City of Malibu was early on, like I said before. Their ordinance just bans plastic bags, but at all retailers. So it's not just grocery stores and convenience stores, which is what many of the ordinances look like, but it's at every store. So if you want to go to a department store there, they can't give away single-use plastic bags either. However, it doesn't address paper bags. So you do see a lot of paper bag distribution in the city of Malibu. Los Angeles County deals with both. So they ban single-use plastic bags, but only at those stores that sell food items. So grocery stores, convenience stores, Targets, Walmarts, those types of stores, but they don't apply to the other types of retailers that don't sell food items. And then they have a minimum 10 cents charge on paper bags, and the idea there is to drive the most sustainable thing, which is reusable bags. Capitola, closer to here, puts similar to LA County, but it's a 25-cent charge on paper bags. And I think that's what Monterey has as well, right? 25-cent charge on paper bags. Mendocino County also addresses restaurants. That's something different than LA County. They just deal with food distributors that aren't prepared foods, but Mendocino goes a little bit further, so we've got a difference there. In Marin County, that's the most aggressive of all of them. You can't get a paper or plastic bag for free in Marin, so they've gone really, really far. And then San Francisco has sort of evolved over the time because it's been in place for a really long time, but one unique difference there is the way they define bags. They actually allow for compostable plastic bags, those green bags. Many other cities don't allow for that. The reason that environmental community generally thinks that's okay for City of San Francisco is because they have a municipal composting system. Most cities, especially those in the LA area, don't. So those bags act like plastic bags once they get to the ocean because there's not high heat, there's not levels of bacteria that can break them down. They act like plastic. They're not going to break down very quickly in the ocean. So you can sort of see that we're in a challenge now where it's great, we've got a lot of good policies in California, but they're not all the same. And that can be very confusing for consumers, especially in areas like Los Angeles County, where there's 88 different cities, many of whom have a different policy in place. And also for store owners, especially chain stores like a Vons or a Ralph's, they have to do something different at each one of their stores. So it's good for the environment, but it's created some complexities that were probably unintended consequences of this type of approach. So the environmental role is many different things that we do to advance policy, but the first is education and outreach. So really getting involved with the community, educating them, and then connecting them to community action. The upper photo there is a bag giveaway with the bag monster. We do a day without a bag pretty much every year, which is right around the Christmas holiday, where throughout LA County we'll have different volunteers stationed to give away reusable bags so people can use them for their holiday shopping, and that's a photo from one of those sites. Also, proactively promoting the adoption of local and state policies. So many of these didn't come to play just organically. It wasn't those city staffers and those city councils out there saying, hey, I think we should do this. It was coming from pressure from environmental advocacy groups as well as the members of our advocacy groups. So it's really important that we have constituencies that are calling for these kinds of actions to get the attention of the staff members and the elected officials. Also the policy review and recommendation. It's not just Heal the Bay that works on this. We've got a lot of partners. Surfrider Foundation plays a big role on this issue. NRDC has gotten more engaged on this issue, many of the keeper organizations, and that's really important because most of the action is at the local level. So we work really closely and we're constantly talking to one another saying, hey, Monterey's considering this or San Diego's considering this. What do you think about that policy? Do you think we should make some tweaks or suggestions to it? So looking at the drafts, working with staff, and it's really important to have those relationships with those local government staff, because if you can have early conversations before a draft is out for review, you may be in a place where you're closer to supporting it or being okay with it, and rather than having to come out at that point and try to change things. So having those relationships and doing review in advance and making recommendations is a big role that we play, as well as mobilizing support. The bottom photo there, some of you guys might know the guy in the Heal the Bay shirt in the front there. That's Zach Gold. Mark Gold, our former CEO, his son, who's at Stanford now, and I think he's at Hopkins this quarter or this semester. I don't know what they're on. But that's outside of the LA County Board of Supervisors when they were considering their plastic bag policy. So there was a big rally on the street and press conference, and we actually held the press conference before the vote, which was a great move because many of the council or the Board of Supervisors members spoke at that press conference in support of this kind of action, and then they were held accountable when they went and voted because they had already spoken at a press conference supporting it and gotten really good media attention. So that was definitely a good strategy for that particular action. This was something one of our volunteers put together that I thought was pretty cute. Never did I think that I would spend 9 years of my career working on the issue of plastic bags. I thought plastics would be a big part of it, but plastic bags I did not think would be a big part of it. But this is the journey that the bag ban took in the city of Los Angeles through Rube Goldberg dynamics here. In 2008, the city council first recommended a single-use plastic bag ban. It wasn't adopted until 2013, so that was a 5-year process. But we had the Majestic Plastic Bag mockumentary come out early on, which really raised a lot of awareness. Bag monsters all over the place has been a big theme throughout the campaign anywhere in the state. And then there was a lot of back and forth between council members making a motion, staff working on something, council members tweaking that motion, different analyses being done, finally an environmental impact report was written, various versions of that had to be considered, and we finally got to a point where the city council adopted it. So it's a really long process to pass this kind of a policy, which I did not have appreciation for until I was actually in it and working on the issue. So moving from local to state legislative attempts, after the Ocean Protection Council came forward with their resolution in 2007 on marine debris, there was a flotilla of bills, so 5 different bills that were introduced in the legislature to deal with plastic pollution prevention. One of them was the NERDLS bill that I mentioned earlier, so keeping pre-production plastic pellets from getting out into waterways. Miraculously, that passed in one session and was adopted and now is fully being implemented. The other 4 bills never made it through the legislature. So another one was a bill that would have put a 25-cent charge on both paper and plastic bags. That was authored by Assemblymember Brownlee as well as Assemblymember Davis at the time. So there was a co-authorship from LA region area legislative members. There was also a bill that would have required the lids to bottles, plastic bottles, be leashed or attached to the plastic bottles. Heavy opposition from Coca-Cola on that one. They did not want to leash their lids. It didn't go very far at all. There was a bill that would have banned foam food containers just at state facilities, so not even at all restaurants in the state, and that was highly contentious. Apparently prisons are a really tough place to pass that kind of legislation because it's the most easily breakable kind of food container. Anything harder can be considered a weapon. So that was something that we hadn't anticipated being an issue at all, but still the state has not done action on foam food containers, which is one of the biggest things we see out in the ocean. And then there was, I think there was a bill on derelict fishing gear as well. So there was a bill that would have required labeling of derelict fishing gear as well as a reporting system where if a fisherman were to lose gear, because they don't want to be losing their gear, it's expensive, they could report it to the Department of Fish and Game at the time, and they would create a database of lost gear. This was something we had support from both the fishing community as well as the environmental community. The reason that bill died was because the Department of Fish and Game was against it, which to me was really shocking, and this was also something that I learned while I was working. Oftentimes you'll get agency opposition because they'll claim that something is an unfunded mandate. If they don't have the resources to implement it, if they don't have the staff, then they might be concerned about something moving forward and being added to their workload. So that was the case with that bill, which was unfortunate because it would have been really good for the state to have that database in place. And in fact, this is something that the West Coast Governors Agreement team that's working on marine debris West Coast wide is still working on. They're trying to figure out how to have a database for reporting of lost fishing gear. So plastic bags is one of those flotilla bills that has sort of led a legacy beyond that first year. There have been legislative attempts almost every year since then, and we still haven't seen a plastic bag ban in the state of California. I thought it'd be fun to walk through a little bit of the history here, just to see the evolution of the plastic bag ban. Back in 2006, there was a bill adopted, AB 2449, which actually required, and you may have seen this as you go into stores, that grocery stores have a receptacle for people to bring their plastic bags back for recycling. So this was just a light bill that sort of started to get the issue out to the public. And it was something that we were supportive of initially. Many other environmental groups were supportive of as well. But on the last day of the legislative session, when this was being considered on the Senate floor, a little poison pill was inserted into it. And this basically said that no local government could put a fee on a plastic bag all the way through 2013. And nobody caught it because it was legislative negotiation that was happening in real time. So all of a sudden we went from support to opposition, but it passed through the legislature. We waged a big veto campaign when it was on the governor's desk, but unfortunately the governor signed it. So this was sort of throwing a wrench in the system because many local communities were already starting to think about doing a fee. At the time, Ireland had put a 25-cent equivalent US levy on plastic bags and paper bags and seen a major decrease. They had seen 90% decrease in plastic bag distribution. And so we were looking at that as a policy model, thinking that would be great for our local governments, plus they could get some revenue from it. And so that was really a shame because it sort of forced us into one policy solution, which was only allowing for bans of plastic bags. But it also is interesting to me because I think industry was behind that, and they sort of created their own worst enemy because there's now been a tidal wave of plastic bag bans put into place, whereas if it was a charge, possibly, market forces would have deterred most people from buying them, but there would still be some plastic bags in the distribution system. So I think it's sort of an interesting policy story. So with that passed, local governments were basically locked into one model until 2013. That's now been sunset. So if a local government wanted to put a charge on a plastic bag, they could now. A couple years later, Assemblymember Brownlee introduced AB 298 that started out as a 25-cent charge on both paper and plastic bags, changed into a model that would have banned plastic bags and put a charge that was an at-cost charge for paper. So it could change depending on what the store, if it's a small convenience store, they might have to pay more because they're not buying as much in bulk. If it's a larger grocery store, they could pay less for paper bags. So a little bit confusing for some consumers, but that was the model that took. Again, that similar model in 2011, AB 1998, but that was going to be just a minimum 10-cent charge for paper bags. So the grocery industry and Brownlee's office sort of looked at average costs of paper bags, and it landed somewhere around 10 cents. So they figured the store could recover that 10 cents that they would put to purchasing the paper bags if they charged the consumer 10 cents, and it would hopefully be enough of a deterrent. Interestingly, with that bill, there was a lot of opposition in the legislature. This is the bill that we used the majestic plastic bag to really push on. And the main argument that they were using is that it would be a windfall for the grocers. The grocers would make tons of money off of this legislation, so it shouldn't pass. And that got the ear of enough people that they used that as their excuse for the vote. It was definitely a tough legislative session for me. I remember being up there, and this got all the way to the Senate floor, calling offices leading up to that Senate vote, being up in Sacramento for the final Senate vote, going to a couple of offices, and they said, our phones are ringing off the hook with supporters, but my boss is just not going to vote for it. And about a month later in the Sacramento Bee, which is the newspaper up there, they ran a story on contributions to various offices. And many of those folks who did not vote for it had gotten some sort of contribution from the plastic bag industry. So definitely unfortunate because we don't have those deep pockets that we can play in that same sort of way. Another funny thing with that bill is that there was a lot of advocacy on both sides. So we had a couple of lobby days where reusable bag manufacturers came up. We had a great coalition. So we had reusable bag folks, we had the grocers, environmental communities, we had the unions on board. So we had everybody up, advocating for passage of this bill. One lobby day while we were up there, I noticed some other groups walking around the Capitol in t-shirts that had a big heart around a bag, and it said, Save the Plastic Bag Coalition. And sure enough, there is a group, who never knew that group would be created, but there's a group that's called Save the Plastic Bag Coalition. And they've been one of the major groups fighting legally at the local level when plastic bag ordinances are passed to try to sue against them. So you never know what kind of environmental or non-environmental groups are out there, but that's a very unique one. They're made up of plastic bag manufacturers, so I don't know if they have members beyond just the manufacturers, but I just thought that was an interesting t-shirt to be wearing around the Capitol. So more recently, the bills have shifted to be Senate bills. Senator Padilla, who represents the LA area, has taken a deep interest in this issue. He represents the Valley area. There's a lot of plastic pollution in the neighborhoods in that area. It's costing a lot for folks to clean up the pollution with the municipalities in that area. So he's taken a leadership role on this issue and come close with a couple of bills as well. So he introduced a bill last year, SB 405. It got pretty close, but one of the biggest challenges we ran up to on that bill is that some folks in the LA area who represent districts where there are plastic bag manufacturers were concerned about job loss. And so they were not supportive of the bill. This year, Padilla is running a bill again, SB 270. He has worked with those legislators who have folks in their district that represent the bag industry. And they've come up with a creative solution where they would create a fund that would be a pool of money that either a plastic bag company or a reusable bag company could apply to either increase their distribution line or retool their manufacturing facility so that they can make reusable bags. So this is the first time this year that we've got one plastic bag company actually advocating for passage of this bill. They're Command Packaging, which is in Senator Lara's district. So it will be really interesting to see where it goes this year. We're still working on other pieces of legislation, which we'll talk about, or pieces of the bill, which we'll talk about in a little bit in terms of definitions and policy. But I think that'll be a new promising turn for the legislation. Yeah.
How many states are there that have passed the plastic bag ban?
No states have done it. So California would be the first. Hawaii has sort of a de facto statewide ban because each county, which there are 5 in Hawaii, have passed a plastic bag ban. So they're totally covered, but they haven't done it through state legislation. Great question. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if California can do it, but we are definitely, I think, closest this year with Padilla's bill. So some of the challenges we run into, and I've already talked about these a little bit, but industry opposition is one of the big ones. They have a lot of deep pockets. They're contributing money to legislators. They've been running a lot of advertisements. So this is one of the ads they ran a couple of years ago where the big, mean grocers are just sucking the money out of the consumers there by having to pay for paper bags. They've framed their arguments wholly in plastic versus paper. They don't recognize reusable bags at all when they're doing their advertising campaigns. They also have some ads when you land in Sacramento and walk through the Sacramento airport. There's definitely promotions for both foam and plastic usage in the area. So they've put a lot of money into trying to educate the public as well as the legislators about the importance of their industry. There's also been a lot of misinformation that's been spread about the plastic bag bans. So basically, in addition to only framing the issue in paper versus plastic, even though all of the legislation that's been run now deals with paper and plastic, there's been arguments that plastic, let's just recycle it. Recycling is the best solution, which on its face sounds really good, but in practice, it's not so good. So if you look at the numbers, less than 5% of plastic bags are recycled. Film recycling is really, really hard, and many recyclers don't even have the right equipment to do it. So City of San Jose did some analyses on this when they were considering their plastic bag ban, and they found that plastic bag recyclers, all recyclers, not plastic bag recyclers, but when they're dealing with plastic bags, it costs recyclers in San Jose $1 million a year to just deal with gumming up of their systems. So it's just not something that's easily recyclable. And then they also argue that education is a better solution, but we've seen with the Levine bill that basically asked for people to bring their bags back, no change in that recycling number. So it's really not working. And then we've also heard that the policies will impact jobs, which is something we should obviously be sensitive to. But you look into the plastic manufacturers in California, and plastic bags are a very small amount of the product line. So if you do the math, we think that there's the ability for these manufacturers to retool and not really have a big job loss suffering in their operations. There's also been a lot of legal challenges. These have mostly been at the local level. Probably one of the more formative cases was the city of Manhattan Beach adopted a plastic bag ban similar to City of Malibu, so just dealing with plastic at their stores years ago now. And Save the Plastic Bag came out against it and sued under CEQA because the city of Manhattan Beach did not do a full CEQA analysis. They did a negative declaration. They just went through the checklist and said, this is an environmentally enhancing law or ordinance, so we don't need to go through a full environmental impact review. Well, the Save the Plastic Bag group argued that consumers would shift from plastic to paper since this only dealt with plastic bags, and so they said you need to do a full environmental impact report. This worked its way all the way up to the California Supreme Court, and it came out with a great decision that said Manhattan Beach was right. This was an environmentally improving piece of policy, and Manhattan Beach was able to get relief and move forward with their plastic bag ban. But it took years and tied that city up, and it also held back a lot of the smaller cities that couldn't afford to do a full environmental impact report to do something that they saw as environmentally improving. So once that lawsuit was dealt with in the Supreme Court, we saw a lot of momentum on the local level, especially with some of these smaller municipalities in moving forward with ordinances. And then the other lawsuit that I think is particularly interesting, and this one was covered in Rolling Stone. This was the culmination of my career. I have a quote in Rolling Stone, which was pretty awesome for me because it's a magazine I've subscribed to since I was in my high school years. So anyways, the article was not about me. We just had a small quote. It was really about this Save the Plastic Bag group. And then, do you guys know Chico Bags? Andy Keller, who runs Chico Bag, is great. He's the guy who came up with the bag monster. And it's a small company based here in California. They make a great product. And he tries to educate his consumers. So he had on his website a bunch of facts about plastic pollution, including plastic bags. Well, Super Bag, which is Hilux Poly, basically, it's them and a couple other big plastic bag manufacturers that are based on the East Coast, in North Carolina court, sued Andy for basically defamation, saying that he was putting out misinformation that was hurting their business. And because they did it in North Carolina, they don't have they don't have any anti-SLAPP suit laws there, which basically means that this could move forward. And so they said that his website had a ton of misinformation. Sure enough, they ended up settling, and he did have some misinformation, but it was really unfortunate because he was linking back to EPA and other reputable websites, but their facts had changed, and he's a small business. He couldn't keep on top of the facts. And so basically the settlement agreement said that they both have to be better about, what they're saying, because he also argued that they were putting out a lot of misinformation as well. But this is a small business owner, and it just was a really bad taste in my perspective in terms of approaches that the bag industry took on this issue.
So you want to explain what a SLAPP is?
You probably can do a better job.
It's public participation. So it's where if someone is just expressing their right, they're petitioning the government, they're testifying, they're writing an op-ed, you name it, and they're doing so in a way that is challenging a business, let's say, developer, happens a lot with land use. We have seen a number of lawsuits that are filed against an individual or a group, a citizens group, and the whole purpose of the lawsuit is to shut them up and to have a chilling effect on their expressions and their, public participation, basically, in petitioning their government to do something. And one of my dear friends was one of the first people to get sued who fought back and countersued the developer and for malicious prosecution. So you're filing a frivolous lawsuit, there's no merit to it. And he succeeded all the way up through the California Supreme Court and then went to the legislature and had this anti-SLAPP legislation put into place that actually allows you to, when such a lawsuit is filed against you, you can seek immediate relief through this anti-SLAPP statute, and a court will actually dismiss the lawsuit on that basis. So it's a really interesting tactic, but not every state has it.
Yeah, and it was, Andy considered countersuing, and he's, like we said, he's a small business. We actually have a coalition of folks who work on this issue, and he participates in that coalition, and we were brainstorming ways to try to get him just to be able to see some relief from our groups and help contribute to the legal costs he was incurring just dealing with this lawsuit. So it really was unfortunate, and I'm so impressed with how strong he was through that process, how he still stayed true to his business and true to the tactics that they take. And it just had to be really, really tough for him. And like I said, I think it was very bad taste in terms of what the plastic bag group did, Hilux Poly, in suing him. So obviously we face those challenges outside of the process, and it's not surprising that we do, but there also are challenges within the process. This is a big, complex set of policies that we're working on, and there's a lot of different players who are in the support realm but have differences of opinion sometimes. So these are some of the challenges that we face within the process. The first is plastic bag fatigue. Like I said, I never thought I'd be working on plastic bags for 9 years of my life. There are so many important issues out there that need attention, that are much more complex and much more challenging, like nutrient pollution and ocean acidification and things that really need, folks who, like you and like the folks who are working in our California and environmental world's attention. And plastic bags seem so simple. So it's sometimes really frustrating to be working on something that seems like it has such a simple solution and we should just get past it. There's also plastic bag fatigue among the public, among the media, although it still continues to be one of the things that is most engaging. So although we think that's happening, it doesn't seem to be coming true. But it's a good reminder that this is something a dear mentor of mine, Leslie Tamminen, always says, that passing legislation is a marathon, or is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And that's so true. So this is just the marathon of plastic bag work. And I think one thing that's refreshing to me is we really see it as a representative issue of much larger ocean issues. So it's sort of like the gateway drug to sustainability. You know, people get plastic bags, they get what they can do to make a difference. And once you start talking about stormwater issues and urban runoff issues and plastics as sort of a symbol of that and a problem associated with it, it helps you talk about things like copper pollution and nutrient pollution and other things that maybe are a little more complex for people to deal with, but you hook them on something they get, and then you can get a little more in depth. So when I take a step back and think about the ways I can use this type of work to educate people beyond the plastics issue, it helps me stay focused and realize that we really need to win on the issue. Another challenge we have is finding common ground among our mutual partners. Like I said before, you know, our coalitions are diverse. We've got reusable bag manufacturers, grocers, we've got the unions involved with us, and sometimes we don't see eye to eye on the details of the policy. So we may see big picture what we want, but when you get down into the nitty-gritty and you're negotiating on language or tactics, you can run into challenges with one another as well as process. You know, we may think that one author would be better in the legislature than another, and a partner might think something else. So it's really hard to, you know, spend the time to come to sort of mutual ground and agreement on process, policy language, and strategy to all be successful, because it's really important, given the opposition that's well-funded and really powerful, that those of us who support this kind of thing are on the same page and supporting one another. So tips for success, those partnerships are absolutely critical. I don't think we'd be as far as we are on bags without them, and I think that's why bags has elevated above things like foam food containers and other issues that seem like they also have a good solution. But because we have diverse partnerships, I think it's really helped get some attention to the issue. The grocers have been really helpful in this particular piece of legislation, and it's great that they have sort of had the stamina that they have to continue to work on it. It's really important to them and the grocers union, and I think that's fabulous. Also, connecting the education to action. You know, it's one thing to go out and talk to a group or do a beach cleanup, but to take it from that, you know, point of engagement to action that's a little bit more in depth is so important, and there's a hunger for it. I see more and more of the folks who come out to our beach cleanups, they don't want to just spend their Saturday morning picking up trash, but they want to figure out how they can get more engaged. Some of those people are the people who've helped make smaller communities like Culver City or Long Beach pass a bag legislation, because they see what they can do and they take it back to their community, they get their neighbors riled up about it, and then they'll be an ambassador in their own neighborhood to pass something, and we need that. We're a finite group of individuals. I have one other person at my organization who's working on this issue with 88 cities in Los Angeles, so we need those volunteers and partners to really advance action and be inspired to do so. And making it fun really helps that out too. This photo on the far right of the screen is Ben Kay, who is a marine science educator at Santa Monica High School, and he runs a program called Team Marine, and he is just a total ball of energy and fun, and he is such a great teacher and so great with his students. He and his students came up with a bunch of costumes with plastics associated with them. So there was like a bottle cap suit, a plastic bottle suit, a plastic bag suit, and those students came up to Sacramento in their costumes. Like, can you imagine as a high schooler how intimidating Sacramento might feel, you know, just on its face, but to come up there in costume and start talking with legislators was really impressive. And he just always finds ways to make things unique and fun, and I think that's so important. Also making the information accessible and easy to understand. I think the Majestic plastic bag is the perfect example of that. You know, you get that it's an issue, but it's fun, it's easy to understand, it's funny, and it stays with you. And so the more that you can work with communications professionals, it's important for for those of you who are doing the work to have good communication skills, but find people who have excellent communication skills and get them involved in your issues are really going to help amplify it much more than you could do alone. And leveraging resources, that also plays into the need to make partnerships and divide and conquer. We've got a great coalition of folks working on this issue in California called the Clean Seas Coalition, which Leslie Tamminen, who I mentioned before, runs. And we couldn't do it without that coalition because we've got representatives from the business community and environmental community throughout the state participating. So folks who live in San Diego and work in San Diego can watch those local governments. We work in Los Angeles. Groups like Save the Bay work in San Francisco, but we're all working together to advance the greater good. And then my last tip for success is make compromises, but don't compromise the intended outcome. You really have to work with your partners and negotiate, figure out where your bottom line is, but don't compromise that. And we'll do a little exercise after Q&A that Laura mentioned, thinking about this. So one of the biggest challenges that I've had with this legislation, which I never would have anticipated, is figuring out how to define a reusable bag. I think we all know what it is inherently. You know, it's something you carry to the store and you'd use over and over again, but to actually write a definition for it that stands up legally in code is really, really hard. And it's a place where people who maybe don't have the exact same intentions as you can manipulate the outcome. And so one example is there's been some definitions have been a little bit weak in the local governments that have allowed for something like a Macy's bag or a department store bag that's just a thick plastic bag to be considered reusable. And that's not at all what I think we would think a reusable bag is, nor would a consumer bring it back to a store over and over again. So that's one of those challenges where you have to think creatively and think hard and figure out, like for me, durability, washability, different components are really important to have in that legislation. And what are those components? So that's just one example, but really staying true to your bottom line and knowing when you have to pull the plug or knowing when you're close enough to what you think is going to be a success and sticking with it is a tough place to find, but really important to stay true to what you're hoping to achieve in the long run. So that's it for my presentation before our breakout sessions. Do you guys have questions? You've been so quiet.